exclusively on ESPN Plus. UFC 313, Saturday. Reigning light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira defends his title against number one contender Magomed Ankalaev, and an explosive lightweight bout between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Pazzi. UFC 313, Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern. Buy it on ESPNplus.com/PPV.
Hello and welcome. This is Hear Her Sports, the female athlete podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery. In each episode, I introduce a female athlete or a woman in the business of sport. I talk to women from all over and from lots of different sports. They share what they've learned from sport, tips you and I can use in our own training. Today, I am talking to the great distance runner, Molly Huddle. Hear Her Sports, Women's Running Stories, and Molly's podcast, Keeping Track, have had a loose affiliation of women's sports podcasts for many years at this point. This is the first time, however, Molly has been on Hear Her Sports, and I'm so grateful to her for making time to be here because, as you will hear, she is quite occupied. Molly is pregnant with her second child. She shares her thoughts and lessons about being pregnant, raising girls, what she learned from her first pregnancy, what she still doesn't know, and also about her book, How She Did It, which I really recommend, and you can order from our bookshop page at hearhersports.com/books. Now is a great time to order through Bookshop because, well, it's not Amazon. Every order you make supports local shops and also this podcast. I have been learning so much talking to mothers and athletes for this podcast. I appreciate all of them being kind about any and all ignorant questions that I ask. There is so much I don't know, and many issues I haven't even considered. Partly I don't know anything because I don't have kids myself, but partly I don't know anything because mother athlete stories are not told. So, consequently, there is a huge amount of missing information, and Molly has thoughts about that. Find links to other episodes with mother athletes in her show notes page. In addition to discussing motherhood, Molly has beautiful things to say about what she has gotten from sport, and she has super smart thoughts about the power to weight ratio. I can't wait for you to hear that. Well, let's say hello to distance runner Molly Huddle and hear about running happy and confident and a little bit delusional. Well, hello, Molly. Talking to you officially on Hear Her Sports is something I've long wanted to do, so I'm excited this is actually happening. So, thanks for being here.
Yeah, of course. Elizabeth, you're one of the first women's sports podcasts I found when I was looking for some, so super excited to be on here.
Oh, well, thanks. We're mostly here to talk about your being a mom and being pregnant again with your second, but I'm sure we'll get into a lot of other stuff along the way.
Yeah.
Well, just as a warm-up, what is your current situation? Things like, childcare, pregnancy, training, physical location, that kind of stuff.
Yes. We are in Rhode Island full-time. Usually I go to Arizona to train in the winter. I don't think we'll be doing that as much. So we sold our training location that we have down there. We had a little house. And I'm on my 26th week of my second pregnancy. So getting close to third trimester and running through it, not doing anything crazy, just running maybe 20 miles a week and getting in the odd harder effort, I guess you could call it a workout. And yeah, hoping to run a few races afterwards. I still have a contract with Saucony at an ambassador level, so I probably won't be training with quite as much intensity just because I've picked up a lot of injuries the last 5 years. So I'm just going to do what feels good and go to the races that, that I feel like racing, and hopefully be racing by kind of fall time. I'm due in May. So that's where I'm at.
Do you feel, 100 times smarter this time around?
I wish I could say that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just know kind of the realm of what to expect. But there's still so little information out there on how to, try and train as a professional athlete through a pregnancy. So I don't know if I even did it right the first time.
Did you lay out a plan or how are you using that information from first time for second time?
Well, while I was pregnant, that was kind of the easier part, and the return after pregnancy was the trickier part. So I just kind of listened to my body, toned everything down by, almost half as far as volume and intensity, and seemed to work out okay. So I'm doing that even more so. I'm probably running even less and even less hard, and just keeping it fun. A lot busier now because I have one child already. So sometimes I just don't have time to do what I want to do workout wise. That's a little different. But I hope I am smarter after, and I hope I avoid, I had a pretty bad bone injury 9 or 10 months postpartum last time. So I'm hoping what I learned will help me avoid that. But some of it was just situational. Just it's harder to take care of yourself when you're taking care of someone else like that, the intensity that you are of a baby. So I'll do my best, but at least I know that I'm prone to that, I guess.
Right. And so do you know why you had the bone problem?
I don't really know. I did get worked up for red S because it's kind of hard to tell when you're breastfeeding if you have reds or if you have symptoms just of breastfeeding because you don't have your period when you're breastfeeding, and it's not super, there's no super definitive test. My blood work I guess looked okay, although I was deficient in iron and vitamin D. Probably that played a big role, low vitamin D. So nutrition, and I had a few biomechanical problems going into, I had sprained my ankle pretty bad 2 weeks before I got the stress fracture. So, I think it was probably largely due to trying to train for a marathon while breastfeeding, but so nutrition and recovery just weren't where they needed to be, but I'm not super sure.
We've been talking about Red S on Hear Her Sports. I mean, did you learn something that is changing how you're, I don't know, fueling yourself now and plan to afterwards, I guess?
A little bit. It definitely encouraged me to take supplements. I was kind of afraid to before because, the general advice from a doctor that I guess I didn't really go to my doctor. I just, while I was at the pediatrician for the 100th time, I was like, hey, should I be taking more than a prenatal? And they were like, we aren't supposed to talk about you in here, but it was kind of rude. I was like, oh, but they were like, yeah, prenatal's fine. You're fine. And I was like, okay, it is actually kind of about the baby because I'm breastfeeding. And if I'm not getting enough vitamin D, for example, do I have to give her supplements, things like that. So I know now not to be, that the postnatal is not enough for a lot of vitamins and minerals, especially if you're trying to train and you're breastfeeding. So I would definitely take, some iron, vitamin D, and just increased nutrition in general, have a better setup for, I don't even know, eating on the go or just feeding yourself when you're busy.
When I was training, and obviously I was not pregnant or postpartum, but the iron thing always was confusing to me because, I would get my blood work back, it would be low iron, and no one knew what to do about it. Because I don't know, this was back in the day. Maybe that's the problem. It was just too long ago.
It does seem to happen pretty easily, and it can happen pretty quickly. So I was never someone who had super low ferritin naturally, but it does, if I'm, right now when I'm pregnant, my blood work a couple of days ago, I had low ferritin, and I was like, I'm taking the prenatal, I'm eating pretty healthy. So it's just a sign that your body's doing a lot, I guess. I always just take every other day for a few weeks a liquid iron supplement, and that seems to always work. But then as soon as I go off it, it goes down again. So
well,
I should just learn.
Yeah. Maybe I just wasn't on top of it on the liquid iron. One of the things that you mentioned in our pre-recording online conversation was that you think a lot about motherhood and ambition. Talk more about that because I don't know, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just the echo chamber I'm part of on Instagram. I follow a lot of people who support mom policy in our country at the high level. And I just think being a professional athlete, you're used to being pretty ambitious in one way. And it's kind of wild because I always thought, and I think a lot of people think this, even though it's not accurate, okay, once you become a mom, that's when you disappear. That's when all the ambition goes away and no one knows what you're doing and you're not doing your thing anymore. And it's a loss. And then on the other side of it, I'm no, you're just really busy. Like your ambition is going into this other person in some part. So like the stream is divided, but you still want to do the other stuff. You're just doing this other super important thing that is like, for some reason, like thought of as important, but not valued by other people. It's such a weird place to be. Everyone's like, yes, mothers are so important. They do so much. Parents are so important. Like the kids are the future. But then it's like, we're not going to help you at all work and raise your kids. So it's just like so weird and confusing. And I'm just like, do I feel this way? Because like, I can't just like buy into the whole, ambition and succeeding in X, Y, and Z form is what makes you valuable. And now I'm doing A, B, and C, and that's not valuable, even though it's important. Like, it's just such a weird shift of your energy and focus. And the way people respond to it is so weird. And you're just, I don't know, I'm not going to do it any differently. Like, I'm just like, this is my priority now, but it's just such a weird thing to notice. And it's like frustrating too. So I don't know. I like to think about it and talk about it with other people who have kind of a similar situation, like women who are maybe coming from like the medical background or lawyers or professional athletes, and like, what was that like? And I don't know, it's kind of sad too that so many of the women in professions like that, where you're an ambitious person, but you have to give so much of yourself to it, or like they felt forced to like kind of minimize the motherhood part. And I definitely think we're at a point now where, people are realizing they don't want to do that, and that's kind of okay. So that's good. I'm glad I'm having my kids during a time when at least that's sort of shifting a little bit, but it's still not any easier.
No, I mean, there's a lot written about how, like one side gets short shifted or the other. I mean, do you think that both can be possible?
No, and not at the same time, but I think one should be looked at as kind of like the huge important project you're working on right now. If that's like getting your child from 0 to 3 successfully, like that should be, I don't even know what the answer is. If it's like pay people, like if that's how we're going to say we value someone, then like give out a stipend for that or something. But yeah, I think it should just be like, yeah, and then you don't really thrive in your career during this point because you're doing this other super big thing, and that's great. And that's, I don't know, I just wish that was more supported. And then it's like, and then when they shift to school age, you can kind of go back to that other stuff. And it just seems like you're instead doing double time for a while. So I don't know.
And how do you square that with your ambition for your running? And then you also mentioned, of course, lawyers and medical people and all that stuff. Like where does that fit in terms of the ambition and having to put that on pause, as you said, for that time period or not?
I mean, I think it can be frustrating to like be used to the freedom to do those things, like to chase whatever your like brain and heart are like wanting to do. And I mean, professional sports is sort of similar, even though at least as a runner, you can get a lot of bang for your buck working for like really hard for like 3 hours a day. So it's not quite the same as doctor and lawyer, but just like that focus, like not being able to do that level of focus on something is like that's a hard shift. But then it's because you are really focused on like all these other tasks and thoughts and planning that you have about like this new person in your life that you're responsible for. So it's like, it is still there. Like the ambition is still there. It's just funneled into something else, but you're still frustrated that you might, there's times during the day with when JoJo was really little, for example, where I'd be like, oh, I'd love to go do this. And like, I used to be able to just think that and like go write it. Like, I'd love to write about this, or I'd love to go plan this training camp, or I have an idea for like, or I need to go get my lift in. And like, I would just go do it if it were the old way. And now you're like, okay, how do I even get any of this done? It's like not actually possible. That's the part that gets so frustrating, because you're just like, okay, I'm an ambitious person and I can barely like get dressed or feed myself today.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was the lack of representation or lack of examples of different ways that it can be done. To me, that's one of the huge problems. And I had Beth Rodden on, and her great memoir talked about that. Like she didn't realize that there were people who were going to have incredible trouble after giving birth. And so she thought that, the message that, oh, all these athletes, they give birth and they're competing the next week and winning marathons or whatever it is. And that was not the way that it worked out for her, and she had not known that was even going to be possible.
Yeah. Roisin McGettigan, who is on the Keeping Track podcast, that she's the co-host with us and one of my good friends. She made an interesting point with, after she had her daughter back in 2011, she was a professional runner and was kind of noticing all these things too. And she and one of her friends who was in the social sciences did a study, and she said, like the stat is, it's like this many women don't come back. It was like nearly half, or it was a large number. I need to go back and look at it. It was somewhere between 25 and 50%. And she was like, and that's kind of the reality of it. It's for a lot of reasons, but not everyone is like, even physical reasons,
Right.
So yeah, I thought that was really good to have someone who at least knew that in my friend group.
Right. Is there an embarrassment of not being able to come back? I mean, is that why there's not as much discussion about the troubles?
I think maybe. I mean, there shouldn't be, but like maybe.
Sure.
And I think it's also just, it's not the story we want to tell. Like the inspiring stories are the like shiny ones that go really far. And I mean, it's like the way you don't hear about a lot of athletes that don't make it to the very top, because it's like, well, who wants to talk about the person that made it like, to the conference championship and that was it, or something like that. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Right. I just read your book, How She Did It, and it's really amazing. And one of the things that struck me was that there are so many lessons. I mean, it's a great book for young girls. It's a great book for everybody. But there are lessons about sport in there. But one of the things I think about with Her Sports is that it's not just lessons with sport that I'm talking about, or you're talking about, I don't think, it's lessons for the rest of your life. So how do you relate the lessons that you've learned in sport to sort of the bigger picture?
I think if you're competing at a really high level, or not even a high level, like if you're pushing yourself in a sport, you learn a lot about yourself and kind of how you work and what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And so I think you take that with you. Like, it's such a great way to learn about how you respond to stress and how you respond to a challenge, and then you work on it in the sport. You're like, okay, like I'm having a problem where I don't fight through to the end of the race or whatever the challenge is. And then you work on it because that's the point of the sport. And it's like the safe space to work on it. But then you have that tool to use when you're done. And it might not be like a physical thing that you're using it on, but mentally, like, or just situationally, or just even if it's a team sport or a sport that you need to, communicate with someone or have a, work well in a team environment, you take all those skills with you. So I definitely think it's just learning how to be a high functioning person is a big part of it. And then taking that into the world. And it's such a safe space and such a space full of like a variety of challenges to like hone all those things that I feel like you don't get if you don't do sports. So even at a low level, like a high school level, I think that people can take that away. And I'm sure that contributes to that stat we've all heard about how like 99% of women in C-suite positions played sports at some point growing up. So I just think most of it is that. And then there are some unique lessons in sports too that I think, there's a level of confidence you get from sports that I think really helps in the outside world.
Who's your book for, do you think? I mean, is it for the high level or the potentially high level athlete, or is it for anybody?
Well, when Sarah and I were writing the book, the girl we had in mind was a high school aged like national class runner, because we felt like that's where a lot of the sort of danger areas were for the sport. That's where you could fall into eating disorders, or just, the stakes are high. So there's a lot of potential for just like not enjoying the sport and having it become a stressful thing that you don't want to do anymore, or poor coaching for, a female life cycle was like a common thing that made girls want to quit who had a lot of potential. We were thinking, we called it the girl that was at the Foot Locker Championship, which is the high school national cross country championship. But I think it's for any like developing athlete, someone like learning how to approach the sport in a way that is like healthy and something you want to take with you like in life. Like it's not going to be a net negative experience, because there is potential for that. Like the higher you get in the sport, I feel like there's potential for that kind of like dark side to creep in.
Does that, I don't know, like, we're like-minded people. So, we like sports, value sports. And then, this dark side is just, it sometimes makes me sad. And it's sad to me that, like here we are in 2025 and we're still seeing some of the same stuff that has plagued women's sports for so long.
Definitely. Yeah. It's hard because some of the stuff, like there are short-term gains with like going to the dark side, whether it's abusing your body, whether it's an abusive coaching practice, whether it's a win at all costs mindset. Like I think like it kind of works for a little while in some scenarios. And so I think that's why we still see it. And then I think about the flip side too, where like I don't think the answer is to like not record results, which I've heard thrown around. And I'm like, no, like there's a level of challenge that's like so worth it and so like beneficial, I think, to be locked into. So I think it's just staying in that zone.
I think a lot about the sort of, I don't know what the saying that I hear a lot now, especially in cycling, is happy legs or fast legs. And that definitely was not the case. That was not the saying when I was racing. It was more like torture them until they perform. And I definitely think that the happy legs or fast legs is a great motto. But I wonder about the results of tortured athletes. An internally tortured athletes. That there is as you said, there's something that is successful about that, at least short term.
Yeah. And I feel like that was a story. Like I think back to the, sports memoirs I read when I was in high school back in the early 2000s. And I felt like that was the trend. Like that was the story. Like the Lance Armstrong story was always told in the light of like he tortured himself and he weighed his food and he was so extreme. And that's kind of just what caught people's attention, it felt like.
Right.
So it's definitely been a shift.
Yeah, it's good. I am curious how it actually plays out in reality. You have a girl, correct? And you're having another girl. So how do you think, given that you've written this book, how she did it, and all of your interest in supporting young girls, but also mothers, like how are you raising your kids, or how are you thinking about raising your kids?
That's something like, especially in the context of sport, that my husband and I talk about a lot. We're just like, like we don't even know if our children what they'll do when they grow up, but we do know we want them to feel supported and not like we are, overly excited about a very narrow like level of achievement or a very narrow topic that they, if they only like track or if they only are going to the state meet level of competition or something like that. So we kind of know some things we don't want to do, but it's hard when you're this close to it. I'm sure a lot of parents fall into that trap of like, I want my child to be resilient and, strong and enjoy like a variety of things and be well-rounded. But then you just, I don't know, you're so close to it that maybe it's hard to adjust when things start to get unbalanced. So yeah, I don't know. We're anxious parents, I'd say.
Are you noticing anything about raising a girl?
She's very like, JoJo falls into this stereotype. She's almost 3 and she doesn't really need like, she would never like do anything like super rambunctious or violent or, she's kind of I guess you would say a typical little girl. And when you see her play with boys, like they're throwing things and jumping off things and they'll run away and you have to kind of like corral them. So that's definitely going on. She's definitely timid. So I think it would be great to teach her or encourage her, I guess, to, I don't know if it's a confidence thing or she's just nervous around groups of kids, but I think that would be something I would want her to be more resilient about, but that could just be a phase too. At this point, I don't know what's personality and what's like childhood development phases because she's so little. So I'm trying not to label her, but there are a lot of things I definitely want her to have in her toolkit growing up. Things like, just as a girl, Just feeling like she can like take up space, feeling like she can put up boundaries, feeling like she doesn't have to people please, something, but those are things unique to our generation. Maybe she'll have her own stuff that I don't even understand.
Right. Do you have ideas or like, did you have good examples in terms of confidence when you were growing up? Are you confident, would you say?
I don't know. Like I would say there are definitely like I didn't come off as confident, but then I feel like I gave myself a lot of good chances. So I think that's confident to like put yourself in really good positions, like surround yourself with good people and feel like you deserve that. So yeah, I don't know. I had a lot of people early in my sports career say like, you don't sound confident. Don't say this. Don't say that. But then I felt like I was doing the right things to like support myself and have myself go far. So yeah, I don't know.
I would like to go back to being a mom, and I was wondering if you have internal conflicts about being a mom and an athlete and sort of what those two things mean now for you.
Hmm. I don't know if I have internal conflicts insofar as like I should like I'm concerned about what my daughter sees me do every day. But it definitely is just a conflict sometimes of like your body feels like it's going in two different directions. Like, being a mom, being pregnant, having a baby and having a toddler, like it's a time where you don't get much rest and recovery. And it's just hard to pay attention to things like nutrition and any kind of detail. And then being an athlete, it's like, well, those are like the two important things for training to progress. So there were times where I just was like, okay, I just am a mom right now and I'm going to try and run. But like, I know that my body is kind of like not on the same page. But I mean, I say it's temporary. 3 years is kind of a long time. And I'd say that's like the tension. I feel that. And then just, of course, like the tension that any working parent feels where they're like, I want to do two things at the same time. Like I want to be around her and do, what she needs during the day. But I also need like a couple hours to like go do what I have to do to earn money.
Yeah. On Instagram, you talked about your 2025 goals. Can you talk about that a little bit more and, how to feel comfortable with goals that are shifting so much?
Yeah, I think running goals will be just pretty flexible. I'll probably only be running a few months in 2025 competitively. So if I get in a half marathon or like one competitive road race by the end, I'll be happy. And then I just have a couple other goals too. Like I'm kind of shifting careers. I want to get more, not shifting careers, but like, well, I guess, yeah, shifting careers. I want to get more involved in other parts of the running industry and running community. Like I want to give more time to that. I want to do things like be on more of the decision-making side of our federation. And, that's volunteer positions where you're volunteering for like chairs and seats. And I didn't do a lot of that before. So that's something I do want to make time for. And I definitely want to do more creative projects. Like I'd love to write another book, and I'm starting to do some coaching. So just getting involved in like other sides of the sport that I had always wanted to dabble in, but just like was kind of waiting for the right time.
During this whole interview, I mean, I'm asking the questions and you're sounding very calm and, said, I'm going to be flexible. But to me, there is this internal tension. And maybe it's just me thinking like, and I just listened to you on another podcast. I think it was your own podcast. Anyway, I listened to you talk about sort of the external forces that, like have expectations for women and athletes. And I'm just curious, like, are you being super calm because you're talking to me, or do you really feel that calm? And is it my sort of putting tension on it that's happening?
I mean, I definitely worry about like stepping outside the predictability of like the running world, I guess. I don't know if that's what you mean, because I know what you got to do to get what you want there for like to an extent. It's like, okay, like you get fit, you go to the races, and then if you do well, that takes care of it for you as far as finances. And it's like, okay, that's not really like where the majority of my energy and time is going to go in the next year and the year after that probably too. So like I'm kind of taking a risk, I guess, by trying these other things because they might not be received well, or they might not succeed, or they might not pay off, or it might not, be valued. You do definitely notice, like, as you get into semi-retirement and retirement as an athlete, like, just how steeply your value drops. Like, people are just, like, not even, like, answering you anymore.
Right.
So there's some tension there.
Yeah.
That's kind of
Yeah.
panic-inducing because you're like, I really have to find something else to do because it's just not, the support just isn't there very long. There's just too many good athletes in the world. Like, it's just too, like, it's hard to find the right place for yourself afterwards. And some people do it really well. And I'm looking at those athletes and being like, okay, like, I don't know, how did they do it? So there's definitely some panic there. But yeah, from the running standpoint, I'm kind of like, I don't know that much is expected of me. So it's all just kind of fun and just that side of it. I don't think there's as much tension. It's like, I'm just going to do what I'm able to do and, enjoy being at the races and try and be like someone who is making the atmosphere like a net positive place to be when I'm there.
I'm wondering too if, like for me outside, it's like, oh, Molly was running and then she's pregnant again. Whereas for you, it's like this sort of day-to-day progression. And so it's not such a stark change, like you're making these decisions each day that lead from one thing to another. So it's quite different from what, like I'm going to be seeing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you're also, clearly you've thought about it, not just for tomorrow where, like when you give birth in May, but also, quite a bit out that you're thinking about writing a book and getting involved with these other things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been thinking about it for maybe a year or two as well prior to this. So
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah.
taking my time. I'm not really just like diving into 10 new things. I'm kind of like trying to see where things fit. But yeah. And also, yeah, definitely some panic around like having 2 kids because I just know how strapped I was for time with one. So I'm like, ooh, I don't know. Will I be able to do anything else? We'll see.
Right. What's your vision for the future? I mean, not just your future. I mean, sort of in the bigger picture. Changes you would like to see to make, being a mother and an athlete easier, I guess.
Yeah, I would definitely love to see. I mean, pretty much everything and Mother, like Alicia and Mother are doing. I would love to see all that just become standard and less of a fight, Like they're really just putting out a lot of effort to make things happen. Like the visibility of needing, places for breastfeeding at major races and events and championships and childcare at these things and better maternity policies that are standard. We had a big change when the Dream Maternity campaign came out. I think that was when was that? 2018? It was a number of years ago, but now we're seeing contracts like you still have to fight for it. Like I've still talked to women in the running industry who are like, yeah, they wouldn't put it in my contract. And that's just like, what?
Wow.
Like we had this big expose and like they're just banking on you not saying anything about it to the media or something. So I would love to see that become less of a fight, something you have to be less like bold about and just have it be like a piece of the support. Definitely would like to see a playbook of some kind for the return to run that's more based in kind of like evidence-based and data and support, helping women get things like blood tests, healthy meals maybe delivered to them for a short amount of time. I don't know. I'm just thinking of the things I struggled with, but like some kind of setup. I would like to see that more standardized. I don't know if it would come from like a federation, like because we don't have a league in distance running or in track and field in general for USATF. So like, I guess it would come from the federation or maybe from USOPC. I'm not sure.
Oh, I'd like to see it sort of more widespread, like women's sport. I don't know who would do it, but
yeah, I feel like it ends up breaking down probably to the being distributed by more your own. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how it would work, but I would like it all to just be like, yeah, that's a given. That's a standard. Like less of the Wild West where you're just like hoping you don't get all of your financial support taken away, hoping you know what you're doing afterwards, hoping you don't get injured for like 5 months afterwards. So I'd say those are the first things on the list.
Right. Is there sort of a clearinghouse of information? I mean, you talk a lot about being on social media, finding out this stuff and following people, but there's an athlete who wants to get pregnant or is thinking about getting pregnant. Are they sort of on their own?
They sort of are. Like I think people are starting to pull things together. I think Mother is working on sort of a playbook. I saw that like, I don't know if it's NWSL. There's one of the female soccer organizations came out with a playbook for return to play. So I think that's kind of only just starting. Like and there's still big gaps in a lot of the research too.
Yes, of course.
You know, I've taken myself as an athlete numerous surveys from researchers trying to pinpoint what to look at. I've been part of a lot of studies, so I feel like we're kind of like in that phase, and maybe, you know, maybe that's going to take 10 years to get that information out. There isn't really one set place to go for information for track athletes anyway right now.
Was your doctor knowledgeable about you being an athlete, or the
No.
requirement?
No, and she wasn't. I think she was wary of saying like stop everything. Like I think she wanted to be flexible and let me do things, but she was kind of just like, yeah, anything you were doing before. But that doesn't really help either, because you know you can't. I mean, I knew I didn't want to do, you know, like a marathon build up while I was pregnant, so I was kind of just like, okay, well, like I don't know. I don't know where that left me. I just kind of decided on my own training and felt it out and just decided to do less, because you're getting less fit anyway. But there are some resources, like now I'm looking into some resources as a coach. Like I just do some online coaching. I just started this year, and there are some classes popping up for like coaching pregnant and postpartum women. So I would like to just see like what research they're using and kind of like, would that be applicable at the professional level, or is it all very base level information? Like things like, you know, the 140 heartbeats per minute limit is a myth. Like they used to say you couldn't go over that, and we know now that you can. Like, or is it more complex info than that? I don't know, but I'm starting to see those types of things pop up more. So I think it's trending. But
I would think that there would be all sorts of mental health complications of having an athlete all of a sudden like stop exercising totally.
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, identity shifts, and you're already having like such a strong like mental health impact from all the hormones and stuff that is kind of unpredictable. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Before we move on, I have one more question for you, but is there anything that I missed about being pregnant or postpartum that is super important that I didn't ask about?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I think probably the main question, or one of the things I would like to see also addressed one day, is kind of like suggested timelines. I feel like that's something that's so variable. So yeah, timeline can be that's what I get asked about the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That to me would really help, having more representation, just more discussion of the range of stories that happen.
Mm-hmm, totally.
Yeah. So before you go, I do want to ask you about power to weight ratio, because I know that you've talked about this in the past and it did come up in your book. And this idea that, you know, skinny is fast, which is not something only runners hear, you know, certainly cyclists hear that. And I'm curious what your thoughts about power to weight ratio are, and, you know, like how do you balance, or how have you balanced that reality of the science with just the myths and the dysfunction of it?
I just think, I mean, I guess I haven't dove too deep into the science, and maybe it's a good thing, but to me, it's a variable that is just so low on the list of variables that impact your performance that you could just like completely ignore it and not even try and hit a certain number. Like I just feel like, just even in my own career, like I have a lot of biomechanical issues, and if I go see a chiropractor or like get some muscle work done right before a race, I'm like 5% better, like more than any performance enhancing shoe level of better, just from being in alignment. And that has nothing to do with power to weight ratio. And I just feel like there's so many other variables it doesn't even need to be talked about, because especially in women's sports, I feel like the potential for damage is bigger than any benefit. And I also feel like you just get there by doing the right workload. So, and it also gets so often misconstrued by coaches as like what they see, instead of actually measuring and looking at a chart and like doing the scientific way. I feel like too many coaches are just like, well, you need to look like this person or something like that. So it's just like, I almost think just wipe it off the list, and you will still reach your potential doing like the 20 other things that I think fall ahead of it on the list.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
I know a lot of other people who agree on that one too.
It's interesting. You mentioned one of my sort of little pet peeves that I would like to see change is sort of this vision of what a female athlete needs to look like. And if you're outside of that range, forget it. You're not athletic.
Totally. Yeah. I feel like a lot of, I don't know if it's coaching alone, but a lot of like analysis of sport is just people looking at it and trying to get too much information from just like a snapshot. And it's like, no, you need to watch people move. You need to go look at all their, you need to be at all their practices, looking at all this body of work. And like, there's just so much there. Like you can't see their VO2 max. You can't see their mitochondria density. You can't see, there's so much you can't see that is working, and to just reduce it to like, yeah, you look like long and lean, you should be pretty good. Like looking at someone just isn't enough information. I feel like people are trying to get way too much information from it.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Well, I've been asking guests about tips they have. Do you have any tips? And you can go any way you want with that.
Tips for listeners in sport?
Whatever you wish.
Oh my goodness. I guess if there are any runners out there listening, winter running tips. That's relevant right now. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a question I have before you go into the tips, and maybe this can be the tip, is that you mentioned that you weren't going to be going to Arizona anymore. How is that? How are you going to manage that? I mean, that's a huge shift.
It's a huge shift. It was such a benefit to my career to have like the nice weather. I mean, most professional athletes do training camps, and that was just the one we did. So I won't be doing too many training camps anymore, but I'll never say never. I think it's going to be a lot of indoor running, a lot of treadmill, a lot of indoor track, which luckily we have access to. And I don't know, for me in winter, I'm always just like, just stay safe. Like, don't fall, don't pull something on the ice, don't like try and do a hard workout and pull your hamstring because it's like 20 degrees.
Right.
People call me soft, but I think if you just stay inside or go somewhere warm, it's way better than trying to fight through it. But not everyone has the option, I know.
Yeah. How did you find success?
I think I surrounded myself with people better than me and who were doing things the way that I want to say the right way, but also I mean like the way that I fit into the best. So I think I chose a really good training group and a coach, and that was mostly, a lot of that was the luck, and a lot of that was listening to people that cared about me, telling me what I should do and where I should go. And I just put myself in a good environment. I think that's why.
Would you change anything?
I wouldn't change, where I went and who I trained with and who my coach was and who my team was. I would probably just change maybe the way I thought about the sport, like maybe thinking, like working kind of more on like, not being so pragmatic, because I feel like it didn't always serve me to be like hyper realistic to the point of like being pessimistic sometimes.
What does the opposite look like? What would you have liked it to look like?
I think just not feeling stupid. Like trying to tell myself stories about what I could do or what I want to do that served me better, instead of always trying to feel like I had to be so harsh. Like the harsh truth is what, like I need to tell myself all the time. And it's like, actually, I think maybe, to be a really, really good athlete, you kind of have to be like delusional in a way that serves you, kind of. So I would maybe try that.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, thank you. Thanks, Molly. It was great talking to you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you.
Thanks, Molly. I am thrilled to add a new Mother Plus Athlete episode to our growing list. I'm also thrilled to be learning more myself about being a mother and an athlete. Thank you. Hear Her Sports has a new affiliate partner, Do Yoga With Me. If you are a newsletter subscriber, you already know I am a super fan of Do Yoga With Me and have been doing yoga regularly since discovering the website. To find out more about all of their classes, go to hearhersports.com/support. If you are looking for yoga you can do at home, I absolutely 100% recommend Do Yoga With Me. And just as a reminder, working with affiliate partners is really difficult as a podcast because you are listening and there's no link to click. So later you go to your phone or your computer and you look up directly, Do Yoga With Me. And no one will know you heard about the site right here. But if you would like to support Hear Her Sports podcast and all that we do, and I'd so appreciate it, you can access the Do Yoga With Me website from Hear Her Sports. You can get there from our support tab, and there is also a link in Molly's show notes page. Well, that's it for this week. Thank you for joining me and Molly Huddle. Check out the other episodes with athlete mothers in Molly's show notes page. And while you are there, sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Hey there, my name is Michael Laminato and this is Pit Pass F1, a brand new podcast that'll take you closer to the action of the world's most prestigious motorsport. From Monaco to Miami and Australia to Azerbaijan, Pit Pass F1 is on the ground and has you covered. Esteemed F1 journalists Julianne Cerasoli and Chris Medland will take you inside the sport every round. They'll keep you up to date with the latest news breaking in Formula One and the most influential views shaping the world of Grand Prix racing. Every Friday, we'll be bringing you a track guide and race preview, and Chris and Ju will be in your feed every morning from Saturday through to Monday to keep you up to date on all the day's action on and off the track. So if you want to be in the know on the latest in Formula One, subscribe wherever you get your favourite podcasts and visit us at evergreenpodcasts.com. Pit Pass F1, a brand new show for Evergreen Podcasts.